Well, Dan, I think it's been around 33 years since I saw you last.
Something like that. You were driving an old white Mercedes-Benz the last time I saw you.
Probably a really old one with no hubcaps.
Yeah. Big dent in the side.
Yeah. It's such a pleasure to see your face, and I've seen a bunch of people since we started doing these podcasts that I haven't seen in ages. And as I mentioned when I walked through your front door, without this podcast, I might never see you again.
Right.
So aside from catching up with everybody, to get your story and everyone else's, to be saved for the rest of the time, to me, that does my heart such great good, because your story with Homosassa and those great years of all the world record chasing, to me, I think that's probably, me personally, that's the best story of the evolution of tarpon fishing. The characters that were there, the records that were being caught, the atmosphere, the fishery was great.
Seemed like every month there was a different fish caught on the world record line.
By somebody.
By somebody.
Somebody there in Homosassa.
Like, who was it? Stu Apps caught 2 in one day.
Right. No, it was a happening place. Yeah. But before we go there, let's back up just a little bit. You're just outside of downtown Tampa, and your home here is just spectacular. You have these big trees with the Spanish moss hanging from them. How long have you been here, and how did you find this house?
Since 1974, 75. I was driving to work when I owned a sporting goods stores. The lady was putting out a sign, and I stopped and asked her how much she wanted for it. And she told me. I said, wait right here, and went and got a check at the store and came back and gave her a deposit and did the contract right there. And
done deal.
Off and running.
You liked what you saw. You're still here.
I mean, it was for on the water. Yeah.
Probably can't find anything on the water for less than a small fortune.
Right. That's what it is a small fortune.
Good for you.
Were you born on the west coast of Florida here?
Yeah. I grew up on the fingers out here on the bay.
And from an early age, was it your dream to become a fishing guide, or was it just something you fell into?
I just saw it. Fishing Homosassa, the guides and everything like that. And I said, that's pretty neat. So I sold the sporting goods stores. Went out and got my captain's license. Started guiding for tarpon. And then it just picked up. Then I got hooked up with Orvis. And before you knew it, I was doing 150, 160 days a year.
And what year was that? Your first year of guiding?
74.
When you got the house.
When I got the house.
Was your family in the sporting goods business?
Yeah. Manufacturing, uniforms, and at one time we did all the SEC teams.
Oh, wow.
Until the big people came in.
Right.
Nike started giving away uniforms and stuff like that.
So the sporting goods stores here in Tampa that your family owned, they were not fishing related, just sporting in general.
Right. Football, baseball.
And you worked the store?
Mm-hmm.
What'd you do there in the store?
Tried to sell everything we had. Tried to make a living.
You were on the floor?
Yeah, but we had everything. I went out and worked the road at night doing all the little leagues, football, basketball, soccer.
The uniforms for all these
uniforms,
young
plus the balls.
Right.
And then back then, phys ed was in the schools, and we were the only sporting goods store on the peninsula here.
Perfect.
And we'd sell a couple thousand pairs of Converse. Truck every week would come in.
Nice.
Because you had to wear black shoes, black shorts, and a white T-shirt. So we sold all that until they said, well, you don't need phys ed anymore. So
then it was a big difference.
Right.
So when did your family get you involved with fishing? Your father? How as a
brother.
child? Your brother did.
My dad was born in 1894. So when I was born, he was 54.
Right.
So he really didn't fish outside of sitting out on the dock and throwing a line. But my brother did. Mm-hmm. One of my brothers.
And how much older was the brother that got you into fishing?
10 years older.
10 years, okay.
To what extent of fishing? Was he tarpon fishing back then?
No. He'd speckled trout. He'd put on his waders and snook fish and
Anything.
Anything. Had no clue about tarpon fishing.
And what'd you like when you first started fishing? Just the tug at the end of the string?
Just the tug at the end of the string.
Right.
Back then, nobody was fishing. You know, there was no people around.
Yeah, what was it like? What was Tampa like back then?
It was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. We'd have schools of mullet, 50 yards wide, 100 yards long, come down, even down this canal here. Go out, throw the cast net, start the smoker.
You guys would eat smoked mullet?
Yeah, smoked mullet. The old guy next door and I.
Was it good?
I know, yeah.
Must have been. I remember a lot of people when I was growing up in Aspen, no one would eat whitefish, but we started smoking them, and they were great. Pike, too.
Right.
Seems like almost anything is good if you smoke it.
Right. Back before we were inundated with all the Yankees moving down here, you could find mullet on any menu in Florida. That was a cracker food.
Wow.
Now you can't. You find cod, pollock.
Do you ever think about going to net some and eating mullet again after all these years?
Yeah. I mean, I could have got a school this morning out there. You know, I do.
Yeah. Oh,
so when you first went to Homosassa, who were the big players back then in the early 70s?
Well, I didn't see anybody until 78.
So you first fished in there in the 60s, possibly?
No, 74 was my first year. What has happened is I was coming back from Tallahassee FSU Florida game. And I was driving down US 19 and I saw Weeki Wachee. So
right.
I drove down the road.
Just curious.
Never been down the road, you know. So I drove out, you know, and it's all hardwoods. And then it turns into sawgrass. Then it turns into water. And I looked out and I saw this like a mirage. And it said Pine Island, 3 miles. And that's when the Bayport Inn was just one building.
Right.
No additions on it. And I went out there and started drilling. I go, man, this is unbelievable. This is really nice. So I wrote down a couple realtors' numbers and called them when I got back to work on Monday. I go, you got any lots for sale out there on the water? He says, yeah, I just listed one. I go, where's it at? He says, down towards the park at the end. It's one lot off the water, but you can see the water from your front yard. I said, well, can I drive up tomorrow and meet with you? I went up there and I thought he was going to tell me $40,000, $50,000. And he said, yeah, this one's for sale for $6,000. I go, I'll take it.
$6,000 for a lot.
A lot.
And that's before you started tarpon fishing?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about that area up there.
No idea what was in your front yard.
So I got back home, and Gary Marconi called me. He was building houses over in Clearwater. He said, I got your rod ready for you. I said, okay, I'll come out after work. So I drove over to Gary's, and we're talking, and I said, I just bought a lot at Pine Island. He says, well, it's nice down there at Boquilla and all that Boca Grande area. I go, no, this is north by Weeki Wachee, and he got white as a sheet. He says, you're not going to believe this, but that's the best tarpon fishing in the world for a fly rod. And he breaks out this photo album of him and Norman Duncan. And this fish was a foot over one side and a foot over the other side on a huge. Now, huge is what, 72 inches wide? It's a pretty narrow boat.
Wow.
This fish had to have been 8 foot long. I said, well, how much does it weigh? Well, we thought maybe 200 plus, but now we're thinking more 190.
Either way.
I said, yeah, I'm building a house up there. A friend of mine's building me a house right now. He says, when's this going to be ready? I said, in 2 weeks. He says, well, that's right. Tarpon season. That's in May. I go, yeah. He says, well, let's go up there and I'll show you around. So he met me up there. No furniture in the house, just carpeting and air conditioning. And we went up there and slept on the carpet. And It was something I'll never forget.
Were you fly fishing at this time?
Fly fishing.
You had already started fly fishing
Right.
before, though.
But I was using Gary's rods. You know,
You
my
built-
stuff that I was fly fishing for tarpon with here were 10 weights underneath the bridge
And
the
smaller
light.
fish.
Smaller fish.
What was your first morning like
First morning,
when you went fishing up there? What did you see?
1,000 fish.
Tell me about it.
Outgoing tide at Guido's Rock. And I just looked up. Gary said, here they come. You look up, and here's a string of tarpon, honest to God, 200 yards long, just wagging their tails on top coming out.
No boats.
No boats. We never saw another boat until 78, only because we went up closer to Chazawiska River, and all the Keys guys were there, Huff and everything, and he was fishing Evans, and you had Dale Perez, and I think he was fishing Robinson. But all the big wigs were there. There were so many fish there that they didn't need to come down.
To find fish.
But over the years, everybody just kind of mingled through each other. You know, Hal Chittum, Stu Apt, Billy Pate.
Fluger.
Fluger was there.
Yeah.
I can't remember who Al Fluger was fishing with. It wasn't a guide. He was fun fishing with somebody. It might have been, he had a brown, Fluger had a brown Hughes. And it might have been Fordyce.
Pulling him around.
Oh, not the son, the father, because they were good friends. But
So you had 4 years with no one around you.
just the local, Neil Sigvarskin,
Right.
you know, and
And
Pete
he's still
sent-
fishing out there, Neil?
Yeah, no, he doesn't go up there anymore. He fishes the beach for tarpon. He fishes by himself. He likes to fish.
Good for him.
Got the trolling motor with the satellite.
With the remote.
Right. Keeps him in one spot. And Pete loved bow hunting more than anything, and he went to Idaho, outside of Boise, to bow hunt. And now he's got huge room, 30 feet high ceilings with all sorts of
Mounts.
mounts,
Yeah.
elks, and
When did the whole quest for record fish start to take place in Homosassa? Because over the years, there's been record tarpon caught elsewhere.
right.
And just the last few years on lighter tippets, there's been a few fish caught down in the Lower Keys area, you know, at the Everglades, you know, the 140 on 6. But for the most part, the real big fish were all caught up here.
Right.
Do you remember when you started thinking, or somebody put the thought in your head, let's go catch a record?
Yeah.
Who was that?
That got me going on that.
Yeah.
Jack Connor and I were fishing together, a friend of mine here in town. And he was making rods. When Gary told me it was the rods you got now not going to work, he says, you need a bigger rod and bigger reels. I said, well, what do you suggest? He said, well, let me call John Emery down. And he was working for Lee Cuddy at the time down there in Miami. So he ordered me 3 equalizers, which were almost like the push pole.
Right. But
And
they
then-
wouldn't break.
Right. And 3 Emery reels. And I got 500-600 yards of backing on each one, and I was off and running. But as talking to these guys, you know, you'd see somebody and you'd go over there and start talking to them. It's just putting in your time. So I figured my first one was 8 pound. I go out, I looked in the book and I saw Stu Apps, you know, 81 or 82 pounds.
Did you know Stu at the time?
No, I did
You just-
after I caught
You just
it.
saw this name.
Right. I saw his name in the book and I said, well, 8 pound can't be that hard. You just don't pull as hard, you know? So it took a while. It took me a couple of years, finally him. And matter of fact, I think I gaffed him right next to Stu, and he was fishing with Ralph Delph.
The two of them were fishing together.
Right.
Right. They got a big story where they lost that big 230 on
Right,
12
right.
at one point.
And then he went on to break
Everything,
12
all kinds of stuff.
twice in one day. I mean,
Right.
that's when it broke loose. I think Dale Perez with Robinson broke a record. I don't think Harry Spears ever did.
No.
But Pate was there, and Evans was there, and they were all breaking records right and left. That was close to when Steve Huff caught that 186 off the front of the boat.
Well, Tom was doing some business.
Tom was in the outhouse.
It's hanging off the back.
But I asked Tom when he caught that real big fish, 192 or whatever, why did it take so long to catch that big fish? I mean, the 200-pounder, the 192, when there were thousands of fish around 10 years, 20 years earlier. And he couldn't answer it. Why all of a sudden were the big fish, did the little fish leave and left only the big fish? No,
because that's all you were seeing were real big fish during that window of time?
Yeah.
You didn't see any smaller fish?
No. Smaller fish always came in June, end of June.
And the big ones were 1st of May, right?
Right.
First 2 weeks of May, something like that.
2 weeks in May.
And what do you consider a small fish? 100 pounds and less?
No, 120, 130.
Wow.
That was the average up there then.
Right.
I had a fish with Neil Sidvarsky. We were drinking beer, just pulling along. And Neil said, look at the size of this shark coming. And I looked out, and sun was in my eyes. And so I started throwing at it, thinking it was a shark. It had to have been 9 foot long. And he got in front of the boat out of this glare, and I looked, and it was a poon. And I know it was way over 250 pounds. And I'm stripping, and he came up like he was going to slurp it, and then all of a sudden he went back down. It was huge. Absolutely. The biggest thing I've ever seen up there.
Did you lose any sleep over that fish?
Of course. You always do.
How can you not, right?
I saw the fish that Evans caught, the 190-something, the day before came by.
The 194?
Yeah.
You saw that fish the day before?
Was within 50 to 100 yards of where he caught it the next day.
Crazy.
It's like they hung out in that little Guido's Rock area.
How'd you get that rock named after you?
Didn't listen to everybody when they said, watch where you run up there. There's some big rocks. That was my first year up there.
And you took ownership of one of them.
What happened?
Took the lower casing off. I had to pull all the way in. It was Mother's Day. And I had run out of flies in my fly box. So I had to pull all the way in. So they named it Neil and Al and all those guys named it Guido's Rock.
How'd you get the name Guido?
Just a guy that worked for me in the sporting goods store. I'd been tarpon fishing. I used to do a lot of bottom fishing for tarpon with the wife and everything. And had a big Panama hat on and a Tom Selleck flowered shirt. And I walked into the store and my employee goes, man, you look like a Guido. And it just stuck.
That's a good name.
Yeah.
What were your leader and your tippets looking like in your flies? What was your bite tippet back then in the late 70s? 100 pound.
100 pound tied, Huff Nagel into a bimini twist, and then to 40.
Yeah, right.
40 or 50.
Did you ever have a fish chew through that 100?
Very seldom. If it did, it was caught in his corner, and it looked like...
It's funny. We fish now with 40 and 50 pound bite tippets. But I think a lot of our flies that we use, like the worm fly and the way they eat it, a lot of those hooks get stuck right off the bone there. So there's no chafing.
Right. That's the old stamp on the front of the boat. When they hook it right there, nobody ever knows what to do. Everybody says that's the worst hookup in the world. But
yeah, Pfluger said he loved that.
Right. That's out of the Met, he said, where you didn't get to use a shock tippet. You just tied it straight to whatever it was. So you wanted them to
right there.
get hit
That was
there.
12-pound light.
Right.
They called it. No bite tippet.
No
back
bite
then.
tippet at all.
And what were the hooks? 5-0?
4-aught, 3407, super strong.
Mustad.
Mustad. Now I'm using a 2-aught Gamakatsu,
Crazy, right?
and you don't think it's going to hold up,
They hold.
and it holds.
Yeah.
Evans's big fish, 192, was caught on a 2-aught or 1-aught, something like that.
Right.
Were you sharpening your hooks back then?
Yeah.
Oh, you had to.
I bought a
for
grinder,
sure.
little wheel. I forgot who made it. They called the Hookster or something.
Hookster.
And needle sharp.
And we used to bend the barb down a little bit.
Yeah.
My very first Gold Cup, I was fishing with Harry Spear, and we saw this fish laying there, and we had, I think it was a 3407 SS, super strong, mustad, sharp and barb bend down, and I hooked this fish, and I was so nervous. I'd caught a lot of fish before then, but this is my first tournament. It's the Gold Cup. I got Harry. I was so nervous. And I thought I was pulling pretty hard, but about an hour and 15 minutes into the fight, I said, Harry, I could really use some water. My tongue was stuck to the roof of my mouth. I was so dehydrated. Harry said, catch me this damn fish, and then I'll give you some Gatorade or something, but you got to catch this fish first, type of thing, And I'm pulling and pulling, and finally the hook breaks. I was never more relieved in my life that I didn't make the mistake. But somehow we broke that hook. But that's what with my early years, 40 years ago in the Keys, that's what Steve and some of those guys were still using. But these new hooks are unbelievable.
Yeah.
Who were some of the, tell me a little bit about Billy Pate. Obviously he put tarpon fishing on the map as well as anybody, maybe along with Stu Apte, but he was up here fishing a lot, chasing records.
Oh, yeah, he was up for a month, 2 months.
Right.
Like Evans. But he was filming that 3M
giant tarpon
thing. So he had a helicopter spot and then this and that. And I think he brought a lot of guides in when that tape came out.
Right. I think the real culprit, though, was Lefty Cray. I mean, he wrote about it after he fished here first. Wasn't he guilty of, exposing it?
No, I don't think so. You had Harold Masters.
Well, they found it, but they didn't expose it
No.
in the papers like Lefty did.
I don't know whether Lefty did or not. I had never heard that.
What about the fight that Archibald had with Chittum? Did you ever hear anything about that fight that they had?
No, I saw Gary Marconi with me in the boat, and Archibald go at it with, looked like Roman spears.
With the gaffs?
With the push poles.
And that was Archibald and who?
And Gary Marconi.
Really?
Yeah.
What was behind that story?
Said we stole his fish.
How do you steal a fish?
When they're all over. I don't know. That was just Archibald.
What kind of a character was he?
Character. Come across the flats doing 90 miles an hour in that shy poke, throwing a big rooster tail. When he wanted to leave, he just...
From wherever he was.
Wherever he was.
Yeah, because he built the shy poke, right?
Yeah.
He designed it and built it.
Yeah, a lot of people had him.
Was he a scary guy?
Nah.
So he was all bark and no bite? Because the story that I heard was that Chittum was up here somewhere at a bar or something, came into a bar, and he gets tackled by Archibald. And Archibald accused him of, exposing Homosassa, and he actually thought it was Lefty. So they had this big tussle, and they get up, and he said, "God damn you, Lefty Cray." And Hal said, "I'm not Lefty." He gets tackled by this guy across the room.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, they were having cocktails together.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like the Wild West in Homosassa there for a while.
It was. It was.
Tell me about Bobby Era, the mobster. What do you know about him? You don't want to say?
Only threatened to kill me 2 or 3 times.
He did?
Threatened. Oh, yeah.
Why would he want to kill you?
He was being sent to prison. And he wanted to fish before he went. So I said, I'm waiting to hear back from one of my customers. He doesn't think he can come, but I'll let you know. Well, Customer called, said he was coming, and Bobby called me. And I told him, I said, no, I can't fish here. My customer's coming. And he exploded on the phone. You could hold the phone away from you and hear everything. Then he was so mad he'd hang up and he'd call back 10 minutes later, still on fire. So then he got sent off. But he and I got along. I mean, he was just one of those guys. I had a guy fishing with me, brand new customer, first time. And pulled by Bobby and John Capt. And he looked at me, he says, I recognize that voice over there. Who is that in the boat? I said, it's Bobby Aaron. He jumped off the platform in the front and laid down in the boat. He says, keep me away from that guy. I know him from the Keys. I kept on rolling.
Did you ever get the story out of him?
He would never tell me what the story was.
But obviously it was not good. Well, unlike Archibald, he had not only a big bark, but he had a big bite.
Right.
In the book American Desperado, which is a book about John Roberts' relationship with the mob in New York, it was a big heroin relationship with the mob. He brought in cocaine, killed an undercover cop, and the mob wanted to kill him, John Roberts, and he escaped and got down to Miami, got connected with Nicaragua, the cocaine, and the Escobar, and the story goes, Bobby Ara's name is in there, and about being suspect of making hits on these guys.
Yeah.
So I had heard his name in the Keys and always heard about the mob stuff. And then when I read this book, which is absolutely riveting, all of a sudden I see this name Bobby Ara, and it gives me understanding as to why so many people were so afraid of him.
Yeah, yeah, they were.
What about, and I see this now a little bit about, all this this issues with the Keys in the early years when new guides were coming down and their tires were being slashed and boats were being doused with resin and stuff like that.
I don't know anything.
Do you remember anything up here in this area where guys were taking revenge on other people's boats and trailers?
Wiki-wachi.
Yeah, what were some of those stories like?
We think it was Bobby Ara doing it.
And what was happening up here?
They just cut him off.
Out on the ocean, he'd get cut off by somebody.
Take some fish that he was going to work or something. He'd light up in a minute. I can remember him throwing water bottles at Earl Waters for cutting them off. You just never knew when he was going to go Sputnik on you.
But having fished up here, it's kind of like a big open area from the Black Rock.
Oh, it's not like the Keys where you got a point here and a bank here.
Right. So everybody is kind of
you go from Wiki-Wachi to Homosassa, pick a point.
Right. But would you guys actually know of a track that would be a consistent path every day where these fish would swim?
Al and I thought we did. You could go to Guido's Rock on an outgoing tide, and there's a place in there I called the Kidney Rocks. Looks like two kidneys with a gap in the middle, and they'd pour through that gap.
On that same tide?
On that same tide.
Interesting. What does your GPS look like? Is it marked up quite a bit as the spots?
I got the spots and I got the rocks. I learned real quick, you better find out where these rocks are. So everything, we used to come out of the Wiki-Wachi, turn it 5 and 6. And there was another sign there that said Smith Rock, which is about 200 yards in. You'd run to that. From there, you'd run a little off of due north. And you'd come to another pole, which was called Mutton Jeff, 2 little sticks. Then you'd go due north from that, and you'd come to a middle rack, which was 8 or 9 wooden things. And then you'd run north of that, and you'd hit the north rack. which was another big wooden stake. And what they were, I think, were bird racks where they collected the bird crap to make ammo during World War I and II.
Oh, wow.
So if you came out of the river and you just stayed north. If you went inside of that, it was like landmines with rocks. You know, every year.
Even on a high tide?
Huh?
Even on a high tide?
No, you can run it on a high tide, but anything medium to low tide, you better watch out.
When the records started to fall, I can only imagine the air around this place, how exciting it was every day when all of a sudden the 12-pound records were going, and they kept exchanging quite quickly.
Right.
What was that like?
It's exciting. You know, we all met at the Bayport Inn, except Al. He doesn't drink, so
He'd go home.
He'd go home.
He's kind of a loner, isn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't go out to eat. You know, he doesn't leave the house, really. If you wanted to see him, you had to go over to the house.
Right.
You know.
But everybody else was in
But
there.
Evans drank, you know, so he'd drink at the house as wine and rum.
Right.
And then when he'd leave, Poontang had come in, Brian Tang.
Right.
And he doesn't drink. He doesn't go out. So Al would be cooking at home for them. So.
Right.
But no, at the Bayport Inn, everybody met there after the day.
I think I was there a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I was a fly on the wall with big open eyes, seeing all you guys walk in.
No, it was fun. We used to have a big barbecue every year there and everything.
Did you read the book Lords of the Fly?
Mm-hmm.
Was that pretty accurate?
No.
It wasn't.
No. There were some people in that book with Homosassa that I wouldn't have put in there because I don't think they're the
main players.
Main players, you know, they were just, you know, tag-alongs. And, you know, did the guy up in Pensacola, right? Or
Oh, David
Magnum.
Magnum.
Why he put him in there didn't have anything to do with Homosassa.
Well, I think the Lords of the Fly was really basically an evolution of the sport. You know, from Key West, the early years, in the book written Mile Marker Zero.
Right.
The first guys who really started fishing for these fish with fly rods and really catching some big fish in the movie Tarpon.
Right.
So I think Lords of the Fly was basically trying to introduce this game that's being played by all these great people and all these great fish. Because I think tarpon is one of the more celebrated fish in the world, the way it swims and jumps out of the water, and they're big and vast. So, you know, the story of the tarpon has a big, long history. And I think the Homosassa story was a culmination of all these exciting people trying to chase this most exciting fish and trying to catch all these records. So the book was not about Homosassa. It was about one guy's identity in this big story of the tarpon. So I think that you can look at it because you were a big player in the Homosassa story. But I think the book as a whole had so much more to it.
So you're saying it just takes bigger area?
Well, I think the story was the story of the tarpon and the guys who chased him.
Yeah.
Culminating with the biggest story of all in the evolution of tarpon, which was Homosassa. That was like the World Series every May.
It was.
And when it got right, and you guys all knew and figured out how to catch them, and you found out where they lived, that's where you had to be. And I think, it gives me chills just saying this because I have lived a little bit of this evolution, and I was in Homosassa in the early years, and then I ran to the Keys because I was not chasing records, but it was a real eye-opener to be up there and to see everybody. But the fishing was not very good, and I knew that I could not evolve as an angler by staying up there. So I left the Keys and did the tournaments. Once I fished with Harry Spear for 7 years, and he kind of groomed me to be a great angler, and then he got me into the tournaments. But I could not have been or become what I became as fast as I did by staying in Homosassa. Yeah. So I had no reason to be up there. But I've seen and read and watched as a history buff about these fish, where they came from in the early years and who were those guys to where we are today. And on behalf of the book and Monty, who wrote it, Evans was a character. So whenever you read a book, whether it be a murder mystery or whatever, there's one character that kind of stands out and sets the pace for the book. And I think Evans, with who he is and his story and his record chasing, was really a great character for that book, because he's been there from the early years.
He has.
In the Lower Keys, and he's still there at the age of 82.
And he's still coming.
That's the thing that he loves. And he's going to go there until he cannot get out of a chair.
Right. Right.
You know, he's not very effective, but he's the book told that story.
Right. Right. You don't see that anymore except for Evans up there. I hadn't missed a year up there since 74, but I don't spend the time anymore up there like he does. I don't spend the whole month. I spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I leave in June.
Right. What are you seeing up there every year now? I know people, if it's good, they don't want to say it's good because they don't want any more boats. When I left there, I think in the late 80s, the last day on the water, I counted 63 boats. I didn't have a shot. I didn't have a cast for I think 3 or 4 days.
That still happens.
It's like, I got to leave.
Still happens.
That is a testament to you guys and your patience and knowing what's going to come down the line at any given point.
Right.
But there's still some good days, you're saying.
Yeah, and that's May.
That's May, and then you were saying that they leave in June.
They go north there in June. They go across the Chazawiska River, and they get out the point.
Right.
They get up in that swamp area and then come out. But it's still good fishing.
Do you fish any anglers that are pursuing records?
No.
How many anglers up there that are still pursuing records, if any?
Evans and Brian Tang. 2 guys.
Are they fishing the 8?
Yeah.
You know, everything else is unreachable.
You can't do it.
2 is 48.
You're odd.
4 is 123. 6 is 143. 8 is the only one available, which is at 127.5.
Right.
And then it goes to 191, 194, and 202.
Right. But nobody considers the 202 a world record. No, 20 shouldn't even be in there.
Right. But anyway, if you wanted to go after 20, how many 203-pound fish are you going to see?
Very few.
Yeah. So the 8's the weakest link.
Right.
And realistically, it's the only link to a world record now.
Right. Right.
How do you describe your emotional roller coaster, if you will, with Tampa, where you live, and the fishing that you saw, and you're still on the water fishing? Is there any sort of boy, this is hard. This is not what it used to be. Or do you still enjoy going out catching the fish?
I still enjoy going out.
That's
but
cool.
Fishing's getting harder. It's not like it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Right.
Where there was redfish 1,500 in a school and 3 or 4 places down by the Skyway.
When you first started guiding.
Right.
For other fish than tarpon.
Right. The only thing there's a lot of is speckled trout, but I hadn't been since the red tide, so I don't know what that damage has done. So It may take years to get back, but virtually no ladyfish. You know, you see snook in certain spots, but redfish, those big schools are gone. And I went to one of the DNR meetings, and I asked the head biologist, and this woman was in charge, and I go, can you explain to me why there's less redfish now than before the net ban? She kind of gave me a funny look, and she goes, why do you ask? I said, because I'm a guide, and before the net ban, it was no problem finding schools of 1,500 to 2,000 to 5,000 fish floating around at Fort DeSoto. Where'd they go? She goes, we have no idea. We're asking ourselves that. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to be a guide now coming up at 22, 23, 24 years old, because they're more than enough guides. I'm sure that's in the keys too.
For sure.
You know, if you get invited to the Met or the Gold Cup, who are you going to get? All the good guides are taken.
It's hard, and it's harder to do well.
Right.
Unless you have a great guide.
Right. That's the whole key to it.
Yeah. You still got to be a great angler, but it's hard, really almost impossible to win without a real top A game player, you know.
Right. And that's how I see it is here. You know, I'm at the twilight of my career at 73. Out of all of it, though, I enjoy tarpon fishing, so.
So it's okay because you don't fish the whole year anymore as a guide.
Not anymore. No, only.
It's too frustrating.
Old customers calling me and saying they're in town for a week. Will you take me fishing?
Right.
But other than that, I don't even have a website anymore.
Right.
I took it down.
So tell me about the day you caught this 167 on 12.
We were off of Pine Island. I'm fishing with Doc McGary, a dentist, and he fishes Boca Grande. He invented that little, they call them coon pop, jig heads. He and another dentist drilled out and everything, and those two guys invented that.
And that's how they caught all those fish in the past.
Right. So he and I always fished together. And he was late 60s then. Skinny.
What year was this?
87, 86, something like that. And it was in the afternoon, and the fish were coming out by the rocks.
Guido's Rock?
Coming right on course. And I go, Doc, here they are right here. And there were only 6 fish. 5 of them are whoppers. So I threw to the middle of the pack, and I started stripping, and this little one comes out from the back and grabs onto it. And the little one turned out to be 167 pounds.
Crazy.
Oh, my gosh. Ran
straight out, about 250 yards, and jumped once. Margie started the boat, put the motor down.
So there were 3 of you on the boat?
Yeah. I'm just rolling, reeling in line.
Reeling your emery.
He never moved. He jumped, and when I pulled him over, his face just came to the boat, and Doc looked at him. He said, I know he's way over 150 because I can't get him in the boat. So I helped him bring him in the boat. We taped him, and he came out like 180. And then I said, well, it's 180. We went to the ramp, put him on the scales, 167. But he was the littlest one in the school.
Wow. What was the record that you broke?
Stu App, 163.
Right.
You know.
And you were the guide with Balch catching the 179 on 12-pound test.
Right.
That was a big fish for a long time.
That was a big fish. He called me 2 years ago and said he was retiring. He wasn't going to fish anymore. He said he was losing his balance and legs weren't working right and everything. So he said, I looked it up on my book. Guess he kept a log on everything. He said, we caught 483 tarpon in the 23 years we fished together.
Wow.
But when he caught I told him, I said, Clyde, you don't want to stop fishing 12. You need to fish 12. Oh, no, that record's going to stick. Look at yours.
So what record was the 12 at before he hooked it or caught
my
that?
167.
That was your record.
Right. He broke my record.
And you were pulling him.
Right. And everybody goes, well, you could have lost that fish for him. I go, yeah, I know I could.
The gaff hits
but
the
that
tippet. Oh,
sorry. That wouldn't be fair. So I said, don't quit fishing 12. Keep tying up 12 because somebody's going to break that. And then sure enough, Evans did.
And what was that record? Oh, after Clyde.
After Clyde.
Yeah. That's 194, probably
right.
One of the best records in the book.
He should have never quit it. He could have bumped it up one more, go to 180.
I would think 179 on 12 would last.
Yeah.
But records are there to be broken, obviously.
That's everybody asked me, well, how do you feel him breaking your record? I said, that's why there's records.
Well, good for you.
You know, so, no.
Who was the best fisherman you ever fished with?
Best fisherman.
Was there anybody?
Tarpon fishing?
Yeah.
Probably Clyde. Clyde was good.
Yeah.
Clyde was good. I fished Evans.
I remember when I first fished here, all you had to do to catch or to get a bite was to show the fish the fly.
That's all you had to do.
Was there a point where all of a sudden it changed and you had to start feeding the fish? Do you remember when that was?
Probably 10, 15 years ago.
That's all.
Yeah. It's like on the beach. Beach fishing for tarpon. We've got a lot of tarpon on the beach here. If you can maneuver around the sailboarders, the kayakers, the jet skiers.
Wow.
But when the fish come down the beach, you know, you'll see 40 in a line coming down the beach, you know, right off the beach.
White sand.
Pure white sand. But you throw the fly out and the tarpon 10 feet from it, and they go around it already. You know, like
yeah, they're sensitive.
You know, they know.
They're persnickety.
You know, the singles, I always have the best on singles coming down the beach, throw it out.
Right.
Not much to that, but when you have a line, it's always like if they're going north, they're leaving. If they're coming south, they're going in the Egmont Pass for the crab when the crabs come out on the outgoing tide. So
it's funny in that.
Well, you don't want to fish the Keys, I'll tell you that.
We use 15-foot
it's
leaders,
so hard down there.
40-pound shock, little number, you know, 1s or 1.0s, really small little flies, short shank, you know, worm flies that are maybe 1.5 inches long.
Yeah.
All clear fly lines.
That's why I've been using those.
Yeah, they work well.
Out of Denver. But, you know, we have no crab run at Homosassa anymore. When I was first up there were thousands of crabs on top of the water. People would be on the bank with chicken necks and everything. It was noted from Weeki Wachee all the way to Chassahowiska about the blue crabs.
That's why the fish were there.
That's why they were there, because you'd catch one, lift them up to take a picture, and he'd shit crabs. You don't see that anymore.
Were there a lot of explosions throughout the day of fish eating crabs?
Looked like depth charges going on.
Everywhere.
Boof, boof.
I asked Billy Knowles one time, I said, Billy, how'd you find the fish in Homosassa? He said, son, all you do is just start running and look for the bus.
That's right. You'd look to the west early in the morning. And you know how the dolphin run in Baja?
Sure.
Or Panama, you see them when you're marlin fishing. You'd look up and you'd see splashes.
They're coming in.
2,000 or 3,000 tarpon coming in. And as soon as they hit Black Rock, they wouldn't roll. They got in that deep water.
And they stopped.
They'd stop.
I saw that twice in my life. Once here in Homosassa. And like you said, almost like a tsunami. The water level was 2 feet higher.
Rise.
And you'd see all of a sudden these bodies and explosions.
Like a submarine underwater.
And all of a sudden, everybody had a fish on, all around us. We had maybe 15 boats in a fairly large circumference, and fish were flying everywhere. And we'd see them in the Gulf of Mexico, you know, down off of, backside of the Everglades. I'd get out there, you know, and on a very calm February day or early March, you just got and just kind of run and stop your boat and look. And you look for the bust. And then all of a sudden, you would have a wave of fish coming in. Did that happen like a lot in Homosassa?
A lot. In the early days, every morning, coming in from offshore. But that's quit. You don't see that anymore.
And the crabs left because of the water quality?
Overfishing.
Overfishing.
There'd be tons of traps up there. You couldn't even... You'd have to watch with a fish on that thing.
I heard that the salinity got too high and the lack of fresh water.
When I first started up there, on an incoming tide, the Weeki Wachi's flow was like going through that little cut in between in Marathon. That little channel that runs through the road.
Oh, yeah, Vaca Cut.
Or Vaca Cut. It was like that. You could hardly control the boat. The current was coming out. Now, outgoing, incoming.
No current.
No current at all.
No water.
So I called Swift Mud and asked them if they could do some research, and she gave me this lady, and she looked it up. That river's only pumping a quarter of what it did in the 70s. So the aquifer's going down, the force of the river. So it's got to do something. You used to be able to smell the fresh water up there.
Right.
Like it rained when you were little.
Sure.
You don't smell any of that.
Lack of fresh water.
Right.
Lack of food. I remember Evans used to just hate Boca Grande, thinking that all the sharks were eating their fish.
No.
Now it's obvious. It's a lack of habitat.
Right.
They still catch big fish up in Apalachicola.
Yeah.
For sure. Not nearly the numbers like Homosassa
But all the
had.
fish that were caught and that were tagged in Homosassa, Weeki Wachi, that area up there, all were tagged in Boca Grande.
Right.
So do they come straight up the coast, or do they go way out and then come in? Because now Al was telling me a couple of weeks ago, him and Brian were fishing offshore in 80 foot of water, and it was solid tarpon out there.
Recently?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago.
No kidding.
Solid. Now why? Are we running them? Are all the boat traffic and people running them offshore?
Yeah, because this time of year, obviously the Keys only has some resident fish.
Right.
Do you guys have resident fish up here?
Oh, yeah.
That are pretty plentiful?
Resident fish.
I'm talking about adult fish.
Yeah.
You probably do.
Yeah, we do.
Probably everybody has resident fish.
Russ Shirley had a customer, and they were pulling along the Skyway Bridge, and he saw one doing the red tide gulp.
The red tide gulp?
That's what we call it when they come up. And you ever seen one do that?
And they breach?
Yeah. But they don't go anywhere.
They spit?
They just come up and take a big gulp of air and go back down.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen it. Yeah, for sure.
I've seen redfish do it. I've seen trout do it. But he pulled his customer around, and they were throwing at it. And they said they got about 10 feet away, and this thing goes 3 times, jumps in his boat. It was about 140 pounds.
Oh, my God.
Oh, I saw that photo. Yep, I saw that.
All his rods.
Scales and blood everywhere. Yeah. It was unfortunate,
Yeah.
That brings a memory of mine that only happened one time. I was fishing with maybe Tommy Locke or Eddie Walker up there, and we had this group of fish coming, and I made this cast, and obviously it was too long because right when the fly was about to hit the water, the tarpon rolled, and the fly hit him right on the top of the nose, right here, right between the eyes, and it just like electrocuted this fish. The explosion was unreal.
Just went nuts.
Unreal. We just looked at each other, started laughing.
I had one I threw out. Lead fish was coming. I threw out. It was about 7, 8, 9 inches off the water, and he ate it like a dry fly.
Ate the fly midair.
Tarpon came out and ate it in the air. And I was fishing with Jimmy Weber. I said, "Did I see that right?" He goes, "I can't believe it." He did. They got good eyesight.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
What? Anything you'd like to say at the end of this podcast as we reflect about the good old days of Homosassa?
Nope. Do it as long as you can.
Because it doesn't last forever.
You ain't got that many sunsets left. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Al. Yeah. It's been too long, and like I said, this is so much fun hooking up with people I haven't seen in a long time, talking about the things that we love so much.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Norman Duncan since he was at the house, and that was built in 73.
Wow.
74, and now I saw him on your podcast, and then he called me when Gary Marconi died. Yeah, but it's strange, yeah. Long time.
Well,
we're all getting old.
Dan, thanks so much. It was great to meet you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on.
You're a good man.
Thanks.
Guido.
When I saw it's West Side Story, what I saw it's just a